deceit. Telling the truth is a revolutionary act. It's the David Knight Show.
As the clock strikes 13, it's Tuesday, the 28th of July, year of our Lord 2026. Well, today we're going to take a look at the resurgent concern about Anthony Fauci. Yes, we are seeing some videos and some diary information that shows what a monster literally was. As we look at Lindsey Graham and the film crew that was following him around. And yet, when we look at Fauci, I can't help but think that Fauci is to the pandemic and the kill shot what Flock is to the police and surveillance state. It is a safe object of ridicule, hatred, and attack. Yeah, Fauci, nothing's going to happen to Fauci. And of course, while people are concerned about the Flock cameras, as they should be, they're not paying sufficient attention to the data centers, except for the immediate effect that it has on someone's neighborhood. The overreaching problem of the police and surveillance state is being ignored, just like the overreaching problem of Fauci. He was one person in a giant machine, yes, an important person, but even the way they're attacking him gives cover to the system. We'll be right back. Well, before we begin with that, I want to pick up with, I think this is an appropriate metaphor for what's going on in our country. We had a situation in the UK. You had a couple of drunk British Army engineers stole an armored personnel carrier, drove it down the street, running over cars that were parked on the side of the street, doing over 100,000 pounds of damage. That's over $135,000, according to UK media. This is what it looked like. This started right after they ran over a whole bunch of cars, so they pulled back to show you what the cars look like. Look at that. They're kicked to the side, crushed. Yeah, so much for the broken window fallacy, right? This is, see, what's happening right now, and I say it's a metaphor, because this is a metaphor of what two guys who are drunk with power, the face of this war, Donald Trump and War Pete, these two guys who are drunk with power, grab the military-industrial complex and they steamroll the entire global economy, as well as killing a lot of people. And nobody died in that particular incident where the UK soldiers stole the armored vehicle. So it's far less concerning. And yet, nothing is going to happen to our people who are drunk with power. You know, we always hear about the broken window fallacy. Well, war is good because we get to build all this stuff back. It's great as an activity. Well, maybe they'll use that as a defense when they're brought up for charges before the judge. Yeah, it's look at all the wonderful things that we're going to do after we rebuild these cars and so forth. Well, we had Lindsey Graham was shown to be laughing about the fact that Trump is really good about blowing stuff up. Yeah, you know, after he started blowing stuff up in Venezuela, he got so drunk with power that he looked for the next conquest. And he's still looking for more. He wants to, even though he can't win this war against Iran, he's still looking for where he's going to go next, or maybe at the same time.
Virtually everything they have has been knocked out now. Their missile count is going way down.
Yeah, this is at the very beginning.
Look what we've done here.
I know.
What a
Almost
demon.
cried.
Yeah.
I mean, like, how long have we been pushing this?
Yeah, for 30 years you've lied to people.
Right, it's here. I talked to Trump this morning. Oh, he's Jack. It's the best thing I've ever done. He loves blowing stuff up. So, you know, there are a lot of people inside didn't want to do it. So I've had my challenges. But President Trump, when he gets into the zone, he listens.
Yeah, the zone.
Asks good questions. You know,
The war zone.
Tweeting. He has done he hadn't tweeted much at all. No drama. He's been a great wartime president. I said last night that Trump and Bibi are like Roosevelt and Churchill. I mean, they're the right two guys to confront.
Yeah, well, you know, watching him laugh, and talking about killing people. And remember, he's good at blowing stuff up. What was the first thing they blew up? A school with kids in it, right? He's just cackling about that. What a satanic demon he is. You know, I remember when Karen was protesting the abortion clinic there in Austin. We carried it live on InfoWars. Several people showed up. They had signs that said, abortion is Planned Parenthood is black genocide, I think is what it said. Something about black genocide. And so it wasn't long before we had our first encounter, first time I ever came across Antifa in Austin. They showed up with black signs that had nothing to say. I mean, what do you say when you are targeting a community for extinction? What do you say when you're murdering babies? Well, if you're Lindsey Graham, you just laugh it off and say, how long have we been working for this? This is great. I mean, this is just demonic to see him doing that. And as that was happening, Karen got some footage, which they played over and over again at InfoWars. Good footage. It's a woman who was there with Antifa, and she gets in Karen's face and she said, I kill my kids. Well, you know, it doesn't really matter, as we've talked about this before. It's like the Dr. Seuss thing, right? Does the size or the age of the child matter? Does it matter if it's an 8-month fetus, which is just a Latin for baby, before the baby is born? Is that wrong? Yes, it is. So why are Christians out there cheering the slaughter of 8-year-old Palestinians by these monsters? Lindsey Graham, Benjamin Netanyahu, Donald Trump. It is monstrous what they're doing. Yeah, he really gets in the zone. He really loves that. And of course, you also have, as part of this film crew following him around, it's just the amazing ego and the seared conscience of people like Lindsey Graham. And of course, Roger Stone did the same thing too. He had a film crew following him around. They followed him around with the January the 6th stuff and Stop the Steal. They got him on tape saying, we're going to make so much money out of this, out of the scam that they're going to run, the Stop the Steal. It's going to be like falling off a log. It's going to be so easy. Well, here's Lindsey Graham talking to his chief demon, Benjamin Netanyahu.
Do you have it on speaker, Ryan?
Yep, we're good.
Okay. All right, connecting you now.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hey, BB, Lindsey.
Hey, BB.
Hey, Lindsey. How are you?
I'm just so impressed. Glad to be your friend.
I'm glad you are my friend.
I'm going to meet with the president this week.
Send me some more money.
Going down to Doral. I'm going to try to get him to join with y'all in Lebanon, to maybe fly some with you. Would you like that?
Yeah, I get that. I think you have a point, but I've been thinking about the other side of it for a second. We're concentrating right now on Iran. If we tell Hezbollah that we're going all the way, we threaten them, but if we actually do it, then they have no reason not to go all the way against us. And right now, that's not our interest. We can do it later.
Well, I'll...
Yeah, who are we going to kill next, and what's the timing going to be? We're going to kill everybody.
I'll put it out there as an idea. We can always go back to it.
Synagogue of Satan, right there. Now, who's next on our kill list? Got a long list of people to kill so you can take their land for the Greater Israel Project. Well, Netanyahu's coming to America. He said it's going to be his 8th meeting with Trump. This is what he had to say.
Your show.
Well, and we want you back. But real quick before you go, Mr. Prime Minister, the anti-Semitism in the Democrat Party, are you worried about losing the Democrat Party? Does it pose a risk?
It's opposition to him and his political party. It's not anti-Semitism.
Yeah, I'm very concerned with that, obviously, because I think a bipartisan support for Israel is important, very important for us. But I'll tell you what I'm worried about most. I'm worried about the reasons that leading Democrats have said privately. One of them said it actually publicly, of why they joined the radical fringe. And the reason is that their family has been harassed, that they're afraid of being tailed everywhere and, being intimidated by this radical fringe. So I think that's really something that should
Who's radical?
be American. You don't want legislators taking their position because of personal intimidation. That's bad. Yes,
You want them taking the position because I pay them, right? That's the bottom line. Yeah, who is radical? Quite frankly, Netanyahu and his party are the most radical of the Zionists. They are the revisionist Zionist. They don't want to negotiate or talk to anybody. They just want to kill people. And we see that over and over again. Yeah, the U.S. is now the United States of Israel. They're working very hard to make that happen. And as all this is happening, Pentagon comes out with an update to the Iran war casualties, as I said before. How can we trust them on any casualty numbers? We can't trust them on anything. They lie to us about everything. And we can see as they're lying, it's like Baghdad Bob. Remember that? Remember the Iraq War? We had the spokesperson for the Saddam Hussein regime talking about how they're having one massive victory after another, and you could see what was happening. Even at one point, he's giving a press conference, and there's an American tank parked really within sight. And he's telling everybody they've defeated the Americans and they're in retreat and all the rest. And there's a tank sitting right there. This is the absurd level that the Trump regime has sunk to with Trump and with War Pete. It's sunk to Baghdad Bob levels. And I think there was some reporters with the guys in the tank, the American soldiers, and said, should we go over there to him? You know, yes, you should have. But the question is, why are they getting such a massive opposition in America? Is it because of people threatening them? Or maybe Netanyahu, maybe it's what you're doing to people that people see.
Races has been Israel, how supportive Democratic candidates want to be of Israel and U.S. aid to Israel. Over the summer, it's been largely seen as a Democratic issue, but it might not just be a party thing. With us now, CNN chief data analyst Harry Enten. When we're talking about Israel's favorability in the United States, in general, there's some big changes.
There are some absolutely huge, mammoth changes, generational changes that we're talking about. I think there are a lot of Republicans, we'll be able to run against these anti-Israeli Democrats once we hit the general election because the general electorate feels very differently from the Democratic base. But the general electorate, look at these numbers on Israel, the net favorability. They're all negative. They're all negative. Ipsos, minus 10 points. Fox, minus 11 points. Marquette University Law School Law poll. Look at that, minus 20 points. Pew Research Center, minus 23 points. Negative, 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 negative. And Gallup earlier this year was also negative. We're not just talking about the Democratic base anymore. We're talking about the general electorate as well. The general electorate has turned against Israel. This is not just a left issue. It is an American issue when it comes to opinions on Israel.
What's the trend line here?
What's the trend line here? The trend line is unbelievable. Look at the trend line here. Compare this to Donald Trump's first term. At this point in Donald Trump's first terms, Israel's average net favorability.
Wow.
You go back here. Look at this. It was plus 51 points. Wow, Johnny says. Wow, Johnny says, because this is wow. Plus 51. It's minus 16 points in the average poll now. That is what, a 67-point shift against Israel in just 8 years. Israel used to be a consensus issue in American politics, and that was a pro-Israeli position. Now the consensus has actually shifted, and now when it comes to general electorate, it is a minus. Israel is now seen negatively, and we're seeing it in poll after poll after poll.
It's because reality has caught up to narrative and overtaken it. Yeah, 67-point swing in general is not just the Democrat Party. It's everybody seeing exactly what is happening with this. And when we look at what's going on with the Pentagon, as I said before, we can't audit them financially. We know that there are trillions of dollars that are missing out of the Pentagon. They were at 9/11. At that point in time. And we can't audit any of that. As I've said before on this program, I had an amazing encounter with a woman who was retired from the military, and they had a little gift shop that they were running down in Texas, and let's see, Wilmington. What was the name of that place? Not Wilmington. Do you remember what that was, Travis? Anyway, this small town that was
Wimberley.
Like, what's that?
Wimberley.
Wimberley. Thank you. Yeah. Reverting back to North Carolina. Anyway, down at Wimberley, and had a little gift shop down there. And so nobody was, it's a lot of Christmas stuff. And Karen was roaming around looking at it. And I wasn't interested. So I was just standing there. And she starts telling me about her life. just monologuing, well, yeah, my husband and I opened this up when we got out of the military. We were retired, and I'm lucky to have gotten out when I did, because it was only about a month before we got hit at 9/11 with the plane. I said, oh, really? What were you doing? Well, we were auditing. And she said, we had found trillions of dollars that had gone missing. And she said, there were so many people in the military and politicians who are retiring because of what we found. See, that's the way they handle it. They don't prosecute anybody. They come to them quietly behind the scenes and say, all right, we know that you stole all this stuff, so just go your own way. We won't make a big issue out of it, because we want people to trust our institutions, don't we? Don't want to violate that trust. I mean, if we have a big scandal here, people might call into question all the money that we're giving to the Pentagon. So yeah, just quietly go your way and you'll be fine. She said, yeah, we were doing great. We were really ramping this thing up. And she said, but my husband got out and he was leaving, and we didn't want to separate. So I retired, and it's a good thing I did, because it was about a month later that these missiles come, not missiles. She doesn't know it's missiles. She thinks it's a plane. We were hit with this thing, and everybody that I was working with got killed. And I asked her, I said, where do you get your news? She said, well, Fox. Same place that'll tell you that Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel are our greatest allies. They'll also cover up for what happened on 9/11. They'll never talk about the dancing Israelis either, or the fact that it was a missile and not a plane. No, you won't have any of that at Fox News. Again, as Tucker Carlson said, if you talk about Building 7 that just fell down its own footprint, he said, you'll get fired if you talk about that. We know you couldn't talk about that. Well, he talked about it. He brought in people who are experts just to ridicule them, just to sandbag them and say, no, I'm not going to show the video of the building falling in free fall. I'm not going to show that. It's just, I will never trust Tucker. Not until he fesses up a little bit more about all this stuff. Anyway, we're back to the point where they don't count the money, do they? We can't audit the money. If you do, you might get killed, right? And so what do we do in terms of casualties when you look at these wars, when we don't have an objective, when we don't have a reason, when it is an unjust war of aggression? We're not trying to stop somebody who has attacked us. That's a justified war. If somebody attacks you, you have justification to fight them in order to stop the war, in order to stop the killing. And in a just war, you're not going to target civilians either. You're going to go after military installations, which we've done exactly the opposite. Iran targeted military installations, and that's not only a moral thing to do, it's a strategic thing to do. Robert Pape has written a book called Bombing to Win. He says if you bomb civilian populations, you lose. Because what you do is you energize their will to fight you, and you have also not affected their military. So he said an effective campaign, if you want to win a war, is to go after military installations, not after civilians. But we're doing exactly the opposite. What do we do? Well, in terms of not having a goal, not having a just cause, not having a cause at all, except we were told to do this by Israel because of their Greater Israel Project. They want land, they want to expand, and so we have to kill people to clear the land off for them. So what do you do in a war like that? We've had one war after the other that are like that. They keep score. They keep score by counting the number of bombs and bodies. And so it's important for us to minimize the count of bodies and to maximize the number of bombs that we've dropped, because that's supposedly winning. No, that's just scorekeeping. It's not winning. We've lost one war after the other with that kind of an attitude. And so, of course, they're going to lie to you about the number of troops that are killed. And so they're lying to you also about the war. They've now bifurcated this war into two separate operations. You have Operation Epstein Fury, which is the one that began it. And now they've got something else that's another operation that's supposedly different. So they increased the casualty figures. They're now up to more than 600 in terms of casualties. That's killed and wounded. So 482 wounded and 18 deaths in the one operation. And another one is 14 service members killed and more than 400 wounded in action in Operation Epic Fury. Bottom line is, they're still playing games. This is what liars do. And that is what we have seen from this Trump regime. They're saying that we got two different wars with the same people back to back. And so, they do that to minimize the number of casualties in each one of these, cut them, split them in these different points, and also a prevarication to get around the congressional law that was recently enacted, I should say recently, 1973, because we have in the Constitution, going back a couple hundred years ago, we have a requirement of a declaration of war that they no longer pay any attention to. Now they don't pay attention to their own rules, their own laws that they did 50 years ago. And this is all about getting around that. As Thomas Massie has said, in reality, they're going more than 90 days without a congressional authorization. They are breaking the law and have to be held accountable. They're also oath breakers to the Constitution. Isn't it interesting that nobody talks about the Constitution anymore, not even Thomas Massie? We don't care about the Constitution. What about that congressional law? Do we have something from the bureaucracy talking about how we're supposed to conduct this? And so as Netanyahu is coming to celebrate the life of a fellow demon, Lindsey Graham, and as he is coming to celebrate the takeover of the U.S. military and intelligence operations, we look at that law that is now in the NDAA. Of course, they put it in the National Defense Authorization Act because that is always must pass legislation. And yet, is there a way that they can get that section taken out? It's hard to say. This is all a take it or leave it approach. This is a deliberate tactic to force the acceptance of this. And yet, even though they have a majority in the Senate, and even though it is passed in the House, they still don't have enough to pass cloture on this. And so even though they had 50 votes in the Senate the last time around and fewer than 50 on the other side, they're looking at the filibuster again. This is Donald Trump talking about getting rid of the filibuster. And he's saying, yeah, we're going to have a great country if we can just get rid of the filibuster. What is the history of the filibuster? Well, the first time they had a long speech to try to stop something from being rushed through was in September 1789, right after the Constitution. And they didn't really have the kind of detailed parliamentary procedures that they now have. And so it was successful. And as they went through the 1800s, it became more and more common. It became a way of stopping things like a national bank, for example. You see, a filibuster is very conservative. A filibuster is there to try to stop changes. And so it ran into a lot of issues when Woodrow Wilson came in. He and his globalist progressives wanted to have a lot of changes. And so they started making adjustments to the filibuster. It's kind of interesting. The curious word that was there, it comes from a Spanish word for pirate. And it was the people who were angry about the fact that the changes that they wanted to make, it's kind of a projection, really. You know, they were the pirates. They were the people who were trying to destroy the established Constitution. And yet they called the people who were talking long enough to stop the bill, they called them, the Spanish term is filibusteros, to describe Caribbean pirates. Now we are the pirates in the Caribbean. We're the pirates of the Caribbean. And it is a joke, quite frankly. But they continue to have these filibusters. Basically, the idea is that you don't want to have a situation where the leadership can just ram stuff through. This is what we see in the House. This is what Nancy Pelosi helped to establish. And then in her wake, you had people, the subsequent speakers of the House, embraced that. And certainly Mike Johnson. And so what's happening in the House, you don't really have an open discussion. You don't have an open debate. You can't bring up bills on the floor. You can't introduce them. It's all very, very tightly controlled by whoever the leading party is, whether it's Nancy Pelosi or whether it's John Boehner. He loved that kind of control. And remember, there was a big pushback against all that. You had people like Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene, Chip Roy, and others. They pushed back against that. They had a change in the speaker that was there. And then there was a pushback against the pushback. And they brought in an establishment darling, Mike Johnson. And so there isn't any real debate on the floor. There isn't any real discussion of issues. He shut down a discussion would not even allow the introduction of a bill to strip this section 219 out of the bill. They completely shut that down. And so the question is, what will be done in the Senate? Trump is very concerned about it. That's why he's out there filibustering about the filibuster. He doesn't want people having the ability to speak. He doesn't want to have debate on this, because the debate's not going to be a pretty sight if you got some people who are opposed to this. As a matter of fact, you got a lot of people basically in the Senate who are just like Ted Cruz.
Well, I will say the question you asked is not an honest description of what that is.
Netanyahu wrote a letter to Congress saying exactly that.
We're not merging anything, and that's silliness. We cooperate with our allies, and there are a lot of folks that are pushing misinformation on this issue online.
I think it's a particularly.
We don't cooperate with allies like this. Any other ally.
Any other allies. You qualified it by saying, "Oh, we do this with all our allies," but this is quite different.
No, we have a close alliance with Israel, a close alliance with Great Britain. We work with our allies.
What happens when our alliances, come up against each other? Israel's talking about Turkey being their next target. They're a NATO ally. I mean, what are your
Israel and Turkey are not getting into a military conflict.
Yeah, right. Yeah. How do you know that? Did your masters tell you that? So even as we are merging, and even as you have traitors like Ted Cruz, isn't it interesting that Ted Cruz never gets excited about America like he does about Israel? He doesn't walk off the stage if somebody is criticizing Israel. He does America. He does if they're criticizing Israel. And as this is all happening, Haaretz in Israel, I guess we could call it ha-ha-retz. This is really a joke. Even as ground invasion looms, U.S. and Iran want wild card Israel out of the fight. This is what the Jewish paper is saying. Listen to how they frame this. They say there is no interest in drawing Israel into a renewed confrontation. Wait a minute. Now it's the U.S.'s war. Now we own this war, right? And Israel doesn't want to be drawn into it? How absurd is that? What a perversion of reality that is. We were the ones who were drawn into this, as Marco Rubio appropriately admitted at the beginning of this, but now they have switched this around. Now the Jewish papers are saying that the U.S. and Israel don't want to draw, the U.S. and Iran do not want to draw Israel into this war. It is Israel's war, but they're going to have us fight it for them, while presumably they're going to go to Miami and hang out like Netanyahu's son. Let Americans bleed and die and pay for war for the greater Israel land grab. That's really what is happening, folks. Not an exaggeration. If I lived in Texas, there's absolutely no way I could ever bring myself to vote for Ted Cruz. First of all, he ran for president, he and Rubio. Neither of them are qualified as a natural-born American. They're qualified to run for the Senate, but neither of them are qualified to run for the presidency. So they began with open defiance of the Constitution, and it gets worse from there. Well, we're going to take a quick break, folks, and we will be right back. Stay with us.
In a world of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. You're listening to The David Knight Show.
Well, welcome back. Donald Trump says he's thinking about getting really tough with Iran. He's already beaten them 30 times, right? He's already sunk their entire Navy several times. And he's already defeated their Air Force several times. They got no missiles left, right? Maybe we're the ones who don't have missiles. Many people are saying, as being reported by NBC News, that Dan Kane and others, the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, have told Trump they need to back off because we don't have sufficient coverage of anti-ballistic missiles to defend our military bases. And so after 13 days of strikes, he's now gone for several days of nothing. But he is out there parading around like a tough guy with a big stick. He says, I'm considering a massive attack, bigger than ever before. I'm close to making a decision. We are all set for it. So he's close to a decision, and he's getting closer all the time to a decision. Is he really? What a fraud. What a pretender this guy is. Again, he loves to blow stuff up, says Lindsey Graham. He really got jacked. You know, when you look at this war that he's got going on in Venezuela, he has now hit 67 boats, he and War Pete, jacked up with power. They have now criminally struck, because there is no declared war. And even if it was a declared war, what they have done would be a war crime, to attack non-combatants and then to come back and to execute people who are shipwrecked in the water. To me, that was an amazing outrage, and that happened with the very first strike. And yet, nobody pushed back against it. So Trump, just like he saw with corruption, he said, well, I was very careful the first term, but I realized nobody cares. So now he is helping himself. He is backing up the truck and loading it up with money. He's made more money in his first year of president than he made in 60 years as a businessman, when he had multiple casinos that went bankrupt. I think that's perhaps when the Rothschilds got their hooks in him with Wilbur Ross. I mean, he is compromised in so many different areas. It's the financial stuff. It's the Epstein stuff. You name it. This guy is compromised. He's bought by the Israelis. It's just amazing to see this. You know, when we talk about the fact that Israel has lost 67 points in terms of favorability, about the only thing they got going for them right now is Trump and MAGA. And there was an interesting cartoon showing Trump blindfolded carrying an Israeli flag here. He's got a blindfold over his face. And then behind him are all the sheep with the red MAGA caps on. And as he jumps off the cliff, they all follow him right off the cliff. That's what's happening. That's where their remaining approval is. It's with those sheep who are jumping off the cliff. Yeah, Trump was jacked, all right. And he hijacked this country. And he's now hijacking it through this Section 219.
What's crazy to me is I think the delusion exhibited by the Israel supporters is even deeper and more disturbing than the delusion exhibited by the standard Trump supporter.
Yeah. Well, it is. And what I find so concerning is that it is typically the people who are cheering this war are Christians. It's like, how could you do that? How could you stand against abortion on one day and then stand for the mass murder of children for years in Gaza? How could you do that? What insanity that is. What doublethink that is. I just can't understand it. And yet they still do it to this day, reflexively. I mean, I've seen publications, and I like some of the stuff that comes from World Magazine, but at the same time, they're eulogizing Lindsey Graham, that demon of war.
Yeah. Quick tip. If you find yourself on the same side as Lindsey Graham, you're on the wrong side. It's literally that simple.
That's right.
If you look over and Lindsey Graham is pulling on the same rope you are in the same direction, get on the other team immediately. You're wrong. Rule of thumb.
That's right.
You don't need to think any deeper than that. Just look at what Lindsey Graham supported and do the opposite.
That's right. Well, Trump did exactly the opposite of what he said he was going to do. As a matter of fact, as I quote it, one person characterized him as a hawkish president that differed greatly from the dove that he sold himself as publicly. And I think that this is really the true Donald Trump. I think he has made a career out of presenting himself as exactly the opposite of what he is. He's not a successful businessman, not by any means. He was born on first base, born on third base, I should say, and thinks that he hit a home run, as Joe Slinty will always say. But if we look at what he did with casinos, how do you run a casino into the ground? I mean, that's like a license to print money. So Lindsey Graham said, yeah, I talked to him. He's jacked. Best thing I've ever done. He loves blowing stuff up. And then he said, I am shocked. There are very few people out there selling this war. And that's exactly what Lindsey Graham was, a war seller. It's called a warmonger. And he has been selling that, whispering into Trump's ear and others' ears. We have one of the reasons that Israel is in free fall in terms of opinion polls in the United States is because people see what is happening, what is being done by the IDF soldiers, the vicious vandalism, not just of churches, not just of statues of Jesus, but going into businesses as well and doing as much destruction as they can. And this is an example of it. This is an Israeli soldier who's going around damaging cars in Palestine and Bethlehem. And some of these belong to Christians, others belong to Arabs, Muslims, and so forth. But they hate everybody that's not a Jewish person. And so here he is going around. He's using his weapon to break windows. He's kicking body panels, kicking mirrors, smashing the windshields. And 3 other soldiers were right there. They did nothing to stop him. Same type of thing that you saw when they desecrated that statue of Jesus. Nobody hates Jesus more than the IDF and the Jews. Let's just understand that. That's why I say this whole idea of Judeo-Christianism is absolute nonsense. If they only rejected Jesus, they would be antichrist. There is no way that we should be yoked with these people. But they don't just reject Jesus, they hate him, they despise him. And look at what they're doing to Christians in other areas as well. And it's not just that. We also have Israeli settlers and a mass genocide here coming in. We've got pictures of them destroying entire villages, coming in one-on-one with guns and say, you're going to leave your farm or I'm going to shoot you right now. People see this. And they're starting to understand what this group of people is really about, what this political philosophy is really about. They're the ones that are making it about race. They've created an ethnic state, saying that they have the right to do this because of their ethnicity. They've got bad theology. They've got bad ethnicity. They're afraid to take a DNA test, and they're afraid to debate the theology because they don't bother to read the Old Testament. They don't bother to read the Tanakh or the Torah. They don't follow it. They reject it wholly. They don't even follow Mosaic law, and they have rejected the Lord and Savior, our Lord Jesus Christ. Why are Christians going out of their way to applaud this open campaign of murder of civilians? It's beyond me. I can't understand it. However, we start to see some of the pieces coming together. A lot of people have said, well, we're starting to, just as we merge U.S. military and intelligence with Israel, formally and officially and legally, because it's already been merged for quite some time, that now we're rolling out the police surveillance state. And as I was pointing out yesterday, we got 3 different aspects of this. We got the eyes, which are the flocks or the Axon cameras or whatever are out there. We have the brain, which is the AI data centers. Call them surveillance centers. That's going to collate all this stuff that is brought in by the eyes. And then we have the boots on the ground and the hands that are going to beat you. And that is coming from the federal police force. Well, Greg Bovino, this openly fascist, and I don't use that term lightly, this guy is the very embodiment of that kind of authoritarianism. Parading around in an outfit that looked like it came straight out of Nazi Germany. Greg Bovino says that he was trained by the IDF, that they are doing the training of the police. And we see that in the way that they're conducting themselves, don't we?
Israel, the nation over there, has a lot of influence on the Israeli government has a lot of influence on our politicians over here, I think, is what he was kind of getting at.
I see. Yeah. And I'm not a politician, so I don't know. And, it's the only dealing.
Well, I don't know about that.
Israelis is when I was a young agent with Border Patrol Tactical Unit, they sent me to a VIP security school, and it was ran by the Israelis. And let me tell you
so
what.
IDF actually does work with Border Patrol and ICE, because I've always heard that.
Well, it was that school was for all law enforcement. It was they put it on. It was Israeli. They contracted with Israeli instructors. They had a lot of experience, and they were really good. I'll hands off some of the best training I've ever had. They did not F around. So that was
they have no moral compunction about doing anything.
But I understand what people are saying. Perhaps there is an outsized influence by Israel. I've never really been up against that, but then again, I'm not a politician. Israel wouldn't, influence me, the Mossad or whatever, however they do that.
Mossad.
What is the influence? How do they do that?
Where's this guy coming from? I don't know where he's from. I've never heard him talk before.
Yeah.
I've only seen him prance around, trying to look like a tough guy. Well, he doesn't really care.
This also to me just sounds like more money laundering to Israel, because there is no way we need to bring in the IDF to teach courses to these people. Are you telling me throughout the millions upon millions of people we have in the United States, we don't have one person that's as good as these people we could bring in? Come on.
Well,
this is money laundering and brainwashing at the same time.
He was saying this goes back, Travis, before 9/11. And take a look at what has happened to our policing since then, right?
Most important tip from the IDF, you see dancing Israelis, ignore them.
That's right. Well, I think what we see happening, and we have seen this in Israel time and again. I've played clips of the Israeli government and the Israeli police and the IDF attacking Jewish protesters, because there's a lot of Jews in Israel who don't agree with these policies. And they come down with them with the hardest of force. I mean, just come in beating people. They have no compunction about human rights. They think that if you oppose their government, you're anti-Semitic, even if you are Jewish. And if you are anti-Semitic and you don't recognize the fact that they are the master race and they can do to other people whatever they wish without any penalty, they will come down on you. And we're starting to see this same attitude, this same training. We didn't used to have the Shoot First curriculum. That came after the IDF was training all law enforcement, as he points out. And so this guy, by the way, Greg Bovino, I always want to call him Bongino. I kind of see them cut from the same cloth. But he was saying, well, I don't know about them Israelis. I'm not a politician. Well, he just announced that he wants to run for president.
Well, now he's going to have to learn about the Mossad.
That's right. The Mossad. Like Lindsey Graham. I'm with Israel and the Mossad. Yeah, forget about all the values, the rule of law, Western civilization, the values that are encoded in the Bill of Rights, the whole concept of all men being created equal by God. No. They are the master race. And if you are the government, you are entitled to do to these people whatever you want. They get in the way, you just beat them into submission. That's the Israeli way. Those are the people who are training our law enforcement. That's why you should be concerned about this police surveillance state that is rapidly developing out here. So you got MAGA supporters, they say, are confused, angry, and frustrated with Trump's DHS. I guess the question is, whose values are we incorporating now? Whose training are we incorporating here? Just look at how they treat fellow Jews in Israel who protest the government. And so this article from Ross Story says, hardcore supporters of Trump who are enamored with him are having some problems with DHS because of the things that they can obviously see happening there. Well, what is happening with Iran and with Israel? We have, as you've reached a stalemate here. They can't win this with a bombing campaign from the air. Everybody knows that. So Trump is forced with trying to find a graceful way out, which Israel does not want to let him do. Meanwhile, the Israeli papers say, U.S. doesn't want to draw Israel into this conflict. What a joke. And then you have the unregistered foreign agents like Ben Shapiro talking about what really needs to be done. And in his opinion, we got to send people his age over to die for his country, Israel.
I get why people are confused and upset. It feels like things are stalemated, that they're getting broader and more difficult.
They are.
Why? Well, because what the American people want is victory. There's this bizarre notion
no, we want
in
peace.
foreign policy that the
you
American
want victory.
people are deeply worried about the immediate cost of war to the enemy. That the American people, that we can't handle the ugliness of war for even a day. That every conflict has to be totally antiseptic.
Antiseptic?
I'm not even talking about the American willingness to undergo casualties.
You are
No one in America
disgusting
wants
scum.
American casualties. It's tragic.
Unbelievable, this guy.
We do understand that war does come along with casualties. And we're
you
willing
don't
to
care.
undergo those casualties in pursuit of an end and a victory for America. But as far as the idea,
what
for
is
example,
victory?
America, we can't hit Kharg Island because the Iranian people would then be deprived of oil resources.
No, it's because you would slaughter American troops.
I should say, not particularly concerned about that. We are far more concerned with why we're there not winning. I think that what we actually ought to do is say an eye for everything. Like you touch a ship in the Strait of Hormuz, and we kill the head of the IRGC, we kill Khalibaf, we kill your entire leadership class. Again, we destroy South Pars and we destroy Kharg. One drone, and that's what happens. That is the way you win in the Middle East. By the way, that's the way you win generally.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you lecture us on how to win. Win at any cost. Again,
well, just so long as he's not the one paying the cost.
That's right. Well, it's exactly what Netanyahu was saying. He said, well, Jesus Christ was basically a loser, right? Genghis Khan is the way that you want to go. He's greater than Jesus. And, of course, Ben Shapiro rejects any concern about what you do to other people, because if you declare them the enemy, if they are the enemy of the master race in Israel, then they deserve to be killed.
Also, I've just got to point out, what is with all these conservative quote-unquote influencers growing that stupid mustache now? It's all over the place. I see these dweebs trying to grow a mustache because they think it makes them look tough, and I cannot stand it anymore. If you're one of these people growing this mustache, shave it off.
Well, it's not Ben Shapiro's appearance that it's what comes out of his mouth that bothers me, not what's on his mouth.
Both. I can be offended by both.
Ben Shapiro, as J.D. Hall points out, his flagship show, which once pulled several million views an episode, now averages around 500,000. The worst collapse, the steepest decline of anything in the ecosystem of news. Just like we're seeing the 67-point drop in approval of Israel, this guy who is nothing other than a shill, a paid shill, and this is probably going to be the only thing that's going to save his media empire, is going to be money from Israel. He saw website traffic cut roughly in half. The company has now run 2 rounds of layoff in just over a year. They just installed a new CEO to try to stop the bleeding. They're concerned about bleeding in their media empire. They're not concerned about the bleeding American troops or the bleeding Iranians that we have unjustly attacked. He said, we do understand that war comes along with casualties, and we are willing to undergo those casualties. He is more than willing to see you die for his country, Israel, in pursuit of an end and a victory for America. No, we don't need this as a victory. We don't care. I never cared about installing the Shah, if anybody would have asked me. It was 2 years before I was born, but it is insane what we've been doing to Iran in terms of, that was the original regime change. You want to make regime change the goal of this war? We have this war, we have this bad relationship because of regime change that you did in 1953. Yeah, stop all of this 47 nonsense. You need to 86 that 47-year narrative. This has been going on, folks, for 73 years. We have been attacking Iran. And so antiseptic, he says, we don't have to get over the idea that war is going to be antiseptic. Well, that's really kind of why they do this war from the air type of thing. They don't want to have a lot of troops on the ground because it gets very bloody. But that doesn't bother Mark Levin or Ben Shapiro or any of these Israeli shills. So it's just bloodlust from them. As J.D. Hall points out, he says Shapiro's monologue was one of the most macabre and eerily morbid disclaimers given in American media, so grossly bloodlustful that'd be odd enough to stop traffic if it weren't coming from a Jewish member of the Israeli lobby, someone I call an unregistered foreign agent of a foreign government. It was very Israel lobby sort of thing to declare, I'm okay with American deaths in exchange for more Iranian deaths. Shapiro is fine with American deaths. It's acceptable. He will take it. He won't fight in that war. And so he says, what does the end look like, says J.D. Hall. How do we know when we have victory? Because we haven't declared what the goal is here. We hear stuff about regime change, which isn't going to happen now. They might have had regime change and gotten rid of the Ayatollahs if they hadn't attacked. But they made sure that was not going to happen. So what is the goal? Is it the nuclear stuff? If it's the nuclear stuff, then as Senator Kennedy from Louisiana, the Republican, said, he said, why are we fighting a war to stop one Middle Eastern country from having nuclear weapons, and we're going to give it to the Saudis, giving them a green light to go ahead and develop nuclear weapons? What's that about? Bottom line is that we have already green-lit the nuclear program for a lot of Middle Eastern nations. They all want them now because they realize that's the only way they're going to be able to protect themselves from Israel and from its puppet, the United States. So what is the goal here? What is the end point here? What is the point of any of this? By the way, that's why the founders said we will have a debate on whether or not we're going to have war or not. Now, once you declare that, you let the president run it. You can't have you can't run a war by committee. You've got to have a commander in chief. But you should have had this debate at the beginning. You should have followed the Constitution you swore to uphold as a condition of your office. You failed to do that. So here we are without any defined goals. And everybody knows that this is going to turn into a quagmire. Yeah, the majority of Americans understand that. You have the UN ambassador went on one of the talking shows on Sunday and said, no, this war is not going to end in 2026. Yeah, we knew that from the beginning. Because if you don't have a purpose, if you don't have a goal, you don't have an endpoint. And we have seen this happen with American wars over and over and over again. J.D. Hall says, sure, we get it. Iran is bad. They're evil. Ooga booga. Demonic savages and all of that. But what are we supposed to be accomplishing exactly? The U.S. military has dropped every bit of strategic munitions we can responsibly drop and then some, pounding Iran with the absolute maximum wrath and fury from the sky we can, while keeping a minimum of reserve of munitions for our own national defense or for the event of an unseen crisis in another theater. On June 17th, when Trump defended his call for peace because the world was running out of oil, he said, we run out of reserves at about 4 weeks, and we would really run out. And there'll be a time when you wouldn't be able to get it, and it would be bedlam. So that's what he's back to right now. That's why Robert Pape, who has written the book Bombing to Win, said this.
Iran is stronger today than it was before the war started. And this is literally the nightmare scenario that we've been worrying about. And the reason you're having me here is because in the next few months, the world economic crisis is going to grow.
And it does appear that you've been largely correct about what you said would happen.
It's because I've been modeling the bombing of Iran for 20 years, and I've advised every White House from 2001 to 2024 on different issues related to conflict. And right now, we're coming into the stage 3 prediction. We're like on the Titanic, and we're about to hit the iceberg. And when the iceberg hits, there's not enough lifeboats for everybody. So we are knocking on the door of the world literally running out of oil. And then on top of that, Stephen, we have another set of problems. For example, Iran is attacking our base in Jordan, and we're in our 9th day of bombing in a row. And the scale of eliminating the drone and missile threat is much bigger than people realize, because they hide those drones everywhere.
So how real is the risk that the US will do some kind of limited ground operation with boots on the ground in Iran?
It's bordering on 70% now.
Yeah, 70% his estimation. And this is a guy who really, I think, understands what's going on here. I think he's one of the better voices out there, along with retired Colonel Douglas McGregor. Well, you have some people who really don't understand what's going on. Here's an example of this. This is a guy who was on the radio. I'd never seen him before or heard about him. His name is Sid Rosenberg, And he gets a radio show because I would never get on a radio show because they would kick me off right away for opposing Israel. But Rosenberg goes on to Fox News, and listen to what he has to say.
It is inevitable that President Trump is going to have to do what he doesn't want to do, which is go in there with this massive all-out attack. There's no other way to stop this. There's no other way to win this war. So, again, he's trying to do the best he can. He's a very nice man. I love President Trump. He doesn't want people to die. He really doesn't. Okay, he's a nice man. But there's no other way to end this. Once you start this, Midnight Hammer was great. Epic Fury was great. Once you start this, there needs to be a finish. And the only finish is complete surrender by the Iranians. I hate to say it, but complete annihilation.
Well,
yeah, there you
we
go.
talked last
Genocide.
time about this. And by the way, I agree. I love President Trump. I love his heart, I think, is really for peace. And
yeah, right. Yeah. No, I think he's jacked about killing people. I think he's got the power, and he wants that. Listen, you hear what that guy said? I hate to say it, but the only thing we can do is annihilate them, right? We've heard this in so many different ways from the Zionists. We've heard Netanyahu out there saying, Amalek, Amalek. The Christians ought to understand when he's saying that. He's talking about a genocide. He's talking about killing every man, woman, and child when he calls them Amalek. That's just code word for that.
I don't think it can get any more clear than total annihilation.
Yeah, that's right. Total annihilation. And, when talking about sending in the ground troops, that's why Ben Shapiro is preparing everybody. Well, war is not antiseptic. You're going to have to spill some blood, some American blood, right? It's not just killing kids in Iran. You're going to have to kill some American military as well. And that's necessary because we want victory for Israel. And so as this person is pointing back here, they said, well, if you want to take a look at the map, take a look at history. We don't have 1 million troops that it would take to even have a chance of victory in Iran. Why did he say 1 million troops? Well, he said, when you look at the peak of troops that we had in Iraq, and I would say that war was not a victory. He said in 2003, we had 150,000 ground troops there. The difference is that Iran is 5 times bigger than Iraq. Not only that, he points out that Iraq was just the ideal conditions, the kind of conditions that they test missiles and bombs in, just a flat desert that is out there. That's not the case with Iran. Half of Iran is mountainous. And of course, the Iraqis did not have missiles and drones that were very accurate. And so this is nothing but insanity. It's foolishness, it's stupidity, it is bloodlust that is being sold to us by people like Sid Rosenberg and Ben Shapiro and Mark Levin, whose loyalty lies to another country, and they lie to us about this. This is not in America's interest. This is not America's war. But now you've got the Israeli paper saying, well, the Americans are going to draw Israel into this war. No, it's your war. It's a war for your benefit, not for ours. So this guy says, what angered me was his claim that American service members signed up, and this is what the guy, when I cut him off early because I can't stand listening to him. He said, Americans signed up to fight wars. No, we didn't. American soldiers signed up to defend America. You see, that is the essential thing that Pete Hegseth gets wrong. He wants to call his Department of Defense, he wants to call it the Department of War. He wants to talk about lethality all the time. No, it is about defending America. And if you have to spill blood, you ought to not feel good about it. You ought to not beat your chest and jump up and down and bloodlust about it. You shouldn't get jacked about it. But that's the reality. That's the problem with Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump. They think the purpose of the military is to fight wars, not to defend America. And they are not defending America. They're putting us at risk. Let me tell you that with the new asymmetric warfare that's out there, the new technology, we are at risk. There's absolutely no way that we can protect America from what is going to be coming in terms of drone warfare. We will be right back.
losing free speech to free minds. It's the David Knight Show.
In July of 1896, exactly 130 years ago, I warned this great nation of the government's plan to crucify mankind upon a cross of gold. Of course, that was before they started to bleed us dry with the death of 1,000 fiat paper cuts. But after you bought every single commemorative David Knight Show coin in gold color, the podcast's gold reserves are depleted. They issued 100 numbered gold-colored coins and declared the mint closed. The people cried out, "Free silver!" Well, the likes of J.P. Morgan can't stop this all-new commemorative coin. Now in silver color, while supplies last, this commemorative coin does not contain precious metal, but does keep the show on the air. Equal to the gold color, this limited run is numbered 1 to 100. Get yours today at thedavidknightshow.com. Hurry, because supplies are disappearing quicker than the purchasing power of the dollar.
That's right. And I want to thank some of the people who have supported the show, some of our producers here. Very key. Thank you so much. These are checks that we received last week. Tom, Nancy, Abby, and 7-year-old Sammy, thank you so much for your support. It means so much to us, and we really do need it this month. We made a mistake in terms of the gas gauge. We were really at 3/8, we had it at 5/8. So now we are at 5/8 because we've had a lot of people who have supported us here in the last week or so. Judy E., the Sellers, David and Deborah W., Aaron F., William G., Fred and Jackie U., Mary N., Mark A., who is new, Richard and Connie R., Stephanie K., Scott C., Margaret Mary T. Thank you so much for your support. And on Zelle, real quickly, Scott L., Felicia H., Matthew M., Brandon M., and Susan L. Thank you all for your support. These are very familiar names, almost all of them, except for the one new person, because we have the same few people who support us each month. And we really do appreciate our producers. You know, the producers are the one who make the show possible because they produce the money that is there. So we thank you all for your support. And on Rumble, we have a couple of comments as well as a couple of contributions. Thank you so much. And by the way, if you're listening to the show and you want to know how the show is doing, you can see the gas gauge at davidknight.news. You can also see where you can find the show in all of its different forms there at that website. And you can see where you can support the show. We have several different places where you can do that. There's a P.O. box. There's also a link to Zelle and to Cash App, as well as we are on Subscribestar if you want to do that. But we have some people who support us on Rumble with tips. Thank you very much, Stealth Patriot, for your tip. He comments, he says, Lindsey Graham is a closet queen goon. The weird thing is that some men are aroused by missile striking schools filled with little children. I didn't even know the name for that sexual preference. Yeah, I guess you could say that maybe is a sexual preference for him. He does seem to be the way that he gets his thrills, doesn't it? Radis Bro, thank you for the tip. He said, people thought Satan Yahoo sending their sons and daughters to die in their wars was a joke. And now they run a drafting simulation as Satan Yahoo comes to gloat over control of the Goyim. That's right. You know, I played that clip a couple of weeks ago. A retired British military guy, and he was addressing some Jewish conference, and he says, well, I'm just a goy, but, and he starts to talk. It's like saying, you know, I'm inferior to you and groveling before them, but please listen to me. I know I'm just your slave, but please listen to me. How pathetic that is to have that kind of a mindset. And I see that so frequently from people who will typically want to sell out our liberties for the promise from some politician that they'll make you safer. But certainly that is a slave mentality that guy was exhibiting. Let's take a look at what is happening with the Trump Great American Disaster Tour. And you know, when Karen and I got married, we went to London for our honeymoon and just kind of camped out. We had not even started working yet, and we just took everything that we had and just kind of hung out and did all the free stuff we could do and barely ate. But we did go to one restaurant. I mean, we lost so much weight. We didn't have a lot of heavy clothes, but we basically every day wore all of our clothes that we brought with us because we'd been living in Florida. We didn't have any heavy clothes, and it was January, and it was unbelievably cold and damp. And so we wore everything. We just alternated which clothes were next to our body, right? As we were doing that. But we would go by and literally just kind of look at bakeries and smell the bread. I couldn't afford to do anything there. But they didn't have the greatest food. But there was one restaurant that did standard American hamburgers. I'm talking about the big, thick American hamburgers like you get at a restaurant or something, not fast food hamburgers. As a matter of fact, they didn't really have much in terms of fast food when we went the first time in 1980 in the UK. The big American franchises had not kind of taken it over as they have now. But there was this restaurant called the Great American Disaster. And that got our attention, and we looked at it, and everybody was saying, this is the best place for a real American hamburger, and they got real American ketchup and all the rest of the stuff. So we went, and it was kind of funny because they had posters all over the place of the various tables of great American disasters, where you're talking about the stock market crash, or you're talking about this war or that war, or you're talking about, at the time, of course, this is pre-9/11. But they had a poster that they made up as well of the Great American Disaster, and that was their theme. And here we look at it, it kind of reminded me of that when I started looking at all these things that Trump has gotten involved in, all these disasters that he's getting us involved in, whether you're talking about tariffs and the trade wars, or we're talking about real wars, or we're talking about making the drug war into a shooting war. Republicans are saying that Trump has made more money since returning to the White House than he did during his previous 60 years. I mentioned that earlier. And again, with a half dozen failed casinos, that was really where I think the Rothschild family got their hooks into him. Perhaps even before Epstein, who knows. But Ryan, for the love of the road, sent this to me. He said, $100,000 a month he's charging people for faster access to Truth Social. Imagine that, right? Just one grift after the other. And he says, I don't even know if this is real. Is he just trolling people for attention? I think both of those things are true. I think he's trolling people for attention, and I think it is real. He knows that if somebody really wants to follow him, if somebody wants to be at the front of the news cycle, perhaps, to know what the latest lie from Trump's mouth is, they may pay for the faster access. But it's just, I think people are starting to get tired of it. As a matter of fact, you have Nate Silver with 520-something, and he is a pollster who has been pretty effective in terms of reading the tea leaves politically. And he says he thinks people are starting to get tired of Trump. Starting to get tired. I was tired of him about halfway through his first term. Trump made a strategic mistake with tariffs, says Lula. You see, this Brazilian communist. Even he can see that this is a massive economic mistake with the tariffs. He said Trump's tariffs on Brazil are a strategic mistake that will harm the American economy. He wrote an op-ed for the Washington Post. Last week, the U.S. imposed an additional 12.5% tariff on Brazilian products on top of the previous 25%, so now they're up to 37.5%, nearly as much as China. And of course, he's done similar things against Canada. He has a bad night or something happens and he's upset with the leader of a foreign country, and he has what I call temper tariffs, or I guess you could call them a tariff tantrum. And he jacks the prices up on this stuff, which, by the way, folks, he does not have the authority. And yet Congress will not remove that from him. They will not impeach him for this. This is usurped power. It's insane to allow one person on a whim, a capricious whim at that, arbitrarily to raise tariffs against anybody. But that's where we are. We have a government that is so corrupt, so partisan, so passive, that they enable this dictator. Lula said he was taken aback by Trump's initial announcement of 50% tariffs last year. Excuse me. He said it was politically motivated. Yes, it is. It's not about economics, it's about egonomics. The point of Trump's personal tariffs is to strike fear into other leaders' hearts. And it's also, I believe, he has been put in place to create global chaos. And he's doing a great job of that. It's, to me, I look at Trump and it's like the government schools and the Department of Education. People say, well, the schools are not working. They're failing. Johnny can't read. He can't write. It's like, no, you realize that is the purpose, the deliberate dumbing down of our children. That's what Charlotte Iserby pointed out in her book when she went to Washington, because she believed Ronald Reagan when he said he was going to get rid of the brand spanking new Department of Education that Jimmy Carter had started. Then she and Phyllis Schlafly looked at it and said, well, they're not getting rid of this. They're consolidating it. They're growing it into maturity, which is what happened during the Reagan administration with the Department of Education. They got fed up. They left and they wrote a book deliberately dumbing us down. And that is the purpose of the Department of Education.
But speaking of books and books that have some real information in them, I'm going to use this as a segue to talk about Jack Lawson's sale on the Civil Defense Manual. He has it on sale for 41% off for the 250th anniversary of the United States. And you can go to jacklawsonbooks.com and get yourself some books that have some really useful information. Now, of course, if Johnny can't read, you're going to have to start there. But
yeah, as a matter of fact, there was just an article about how the Silicon Valley people, in order to feed AI, they're actually feeding rare historical out-of-print books into their AI to read this stuff. And what they're doing in the process is they're destroying these books. They're shredding them so they can feed them into the scanners and then just throwing them away. What a crime. And so I don't know if they're going to do that with Jack Lawson's book, but don't you do that. He put it deliberately, did not make it available in an electronic format. He did it in a print format, 2 volumes that he has. And he said, you're going to have this, a physical copy of this, if the scenario really happens, to have a reference, a review point. And he covers so many things in his Civil Defense Manual. And right now, big sale just for the month of July. And we're drawing to the close of the month of July. So make sure you take advantage of that. As a matter of fact, we also have a sale from homesteadproducts.com. Homestead Products shop, is it?
Homestead Products.
I'm doing this off of memory. Yes, and take a look. They have a new tincture there that is on sale that is a great way to help you if you got allergies. If you're an Israeli and you're allergic to olive trees because you're not from Palestine, then this is the product for you. Maybe we should have a large shipment to Israel with this. But it is a natural product that helps people who have allergies and who have cold and flu, and it is on sale right now. Going back to Trump and what he's doing in terms of the tariffs, Lula said he was taken back by Trump's initial announcement of 50% tariffs last year. Again, it is egonomics. It is ego politics. It's not geopolitics or economics. He said the tariffs are going to hurt American industries, which we've already seen, which depend on Brazilian imports. You know, when you got manufacturing in the U.S., this is the reality of where we are right now, and you can't just change it by snapping your fingers. This is something that has to gradually change, but that's why I say Trump is an agent of chaos, and we need to get smart about that. Where's Maxwell Smart? We need him, right? But when you have a distributed production system, everybody is dependent on supplies that are coming in from other places, and when you cut that supply off, you make it very difficult for American manufacturers to continue to manufacture, or you make their products more expensive, which is the point that he was making. This is a communist who is lecturing Trump on economics. That's how pathetic it has gotten here. So he said the new tariffs are a strategic mistake. They will harm the U.S. economy. They will disrupt supply chains, and they will prompt Brazilian companies to replace their U.S. suppliers with partners elsewhere. This is what we've seen with farmers in China. You know, in Trump's first term, he did that to the farmers, and he's done it in a much bigger way this time around, and they still support him for some reason. I don't know. It's Argentina that benefited from this, and he said the Caribbean doesn't need aircraft carriers patrolling their waters, and they don't need punitive tariffs. And so, again, he is, this communist Lula is going to be facing the son of Bolsonaro. And he has been sentenced to 27 years in prison last year for plotting a coup, they say, after he lost his 2022 re-election bid. A lot of similarities between him and Trump. But the reality is that this guy who's running, his son who's running, is his only chance of getting a pardon. What I find interesting is that Bolsonaro, the guy who's now in prison, has been married several times, and his current wife, who was a waitress, he married her, and she became very active in politics. And she has been, after he was taken out, she became a key spokesperson within that political party. She is the stepmother of the guy who is of the Bolsonaro son who is running, and she has come out in opposition to him in a family feud. She said he doesn't respect me, and so they may wind up keeping the communist in party there, in power, I should say. So when you look at what Trump has done, even as he has telegraphed weakness, and everybody can see how weak and how empty his vain boasting is, he continues to put up all kinds of crazy memes over the last weekend. He put up memes about create a fake movie poster called Trump X Washington. The past is about to change and history is about to be saved. And it shows Trump going back in time and saving George Washington. What a joke. Can you pull that up? I don't know if it will show up here. There we go. Look at that. He's coming through the time machine thing, and I guess he's going to need the gigawatts, but he can't get them because the data centers have all taken the gigawatts. He's not going to be able to get back the current time, I guess, with that. Have to go to the clock tower. AI-generated poster of a sci-fi movie called Cosmic Commander. Another posting showed a U.S. fighter planes unleashing their fire on Karg Island, the oil terminal there in the Strait of Hormuz. The problem is that Trump can't even meme as well as Iran can. Iran's got somebody doing Lego parodies of Trump and the Trump family. They are much better, much more sophisticated. Another showed the president looming large in the sky while military jets soared across the country. And he had a caption, "Guardians of the World." Well, that'd be bad enough. I mean, that was what Truman did when he made us policemen of the world, right? Except we're not guardians of the world. We're guarding Israel. We're destroying the global economy by this oil embargo that Trump has kicked off. And Trump is wearing a hat and the meme that read FAFO. Well, I guess he did FA, and now he is finding out about it. The posts were uploaded on the same day that Mike Waltz, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, told Fox News that the strikes on Iran had been paused because Trump was giving talks some space. He's only put these pauses in because they're running out of oil and running out of defensive missiles. Meanwhile, he tries to look tough, and he puts out a bunch of AI slop on Truth Social to try to make himself look tough. It is the same type of game that we've seen being played over and over again. It's why Nate Silver, as I said before, is thinking that people may be moving on from Trump. He said he's shocked by the lack of riveting Trump-focused headlines this summer outside of the Iran war, which he said is still a pretty big deal. He said otherwise, though, Trump content is now dull. He said it might be a sign that the U.S. is ditching the president as the newsmaker-in-chief. He said it's kind of striking how, apart from Iran, most of the Trump-related stories this summer have been boring and dumb. Things like the reflection pool fights or the White House Correspondents' Dinner, or something's kind of funny like him trying to photobomb the what was happening with the World Cup. But other than that, other than things that make him look little and stupid, there really isn't much that is out there. As a matter of fact, when you look at what he did with the White House Correspondents' Dinner, which they held again because of it was suspended when that guy allegedly was running through there with an attempt at Trump. He's now telling them, you're going to be sad when I'm gone. I think he overestimates
You
this.
people have no idea how lucky you are. When I'm gone, you're all going to be broke. Your business model is going to be finished. No, it's true. When I'm not around, you're going to be broke. There's not going to be anybody to report on. Nobody gives a damn about anybody else.
Yeah, it's all about me, says the ego. The ego has landed. Listen to how vicious and petty he was. This is a situation where they're supposed to roast the president roasts the journalist. But this is just petty, vile, and mean-spirited, what he had to say about people. Listen to this. This is the beginning of part of his speech here.
But I want to personally congratulate CNN's Caitlin Collins on receiving her award. It was all about me. It's a fake. She shouldn't get the award. It was a fake, but I didn't mind. I said, Caitlin, congratulations. But it was fake. There's no question about it. But she's a young, attractive woman. She never smiles. I said, Caitlin, do you have a smile? Smile. You have a nice position. You're at CNN Fake News.
Because she's asking you about the Epstein documents. She's not smiling.
Just smile, Caitlin. Just smile. But
it's a joke, right?
We attack, and I thought Caitlin had really made it big with a major new sponsorship. But then I informed her that it wasn't her on the Bud Light can. It was Dylan Mulvaney. And Dylan Mulvaney cost Bud Light $35 billion in market cap. That was the worst commercial ever made, by the way, for those few people that want to hear that. Most people don't care, but I would. I wouldn't want to hire Dylan anytime soon. Think of it. They hired Dylan Mulvaney, and their market cap has gone down by $35 billion. Who wrote that commercial? And then you have writer Josh Dorsey. He also received. He's been killing me for years. No, he's been, and yet tonight he shakes my hand. He hugs me, everything nice. He kills me. Josh is amazing. He writes more stories than any human being. There's nobody that writes more than Josh. He'll write 4 stories about me a day, all different subjects. I mean, I had the other day 3 stories and one on the, he was upset about this. 1 was on page 7, 3 were on page 1. They were all written by Josh. But he's hit the big time, and he's a workhorse, and yet he's almost unhireable. You know, he's just one of these guys.
That's the pettiness, the viciousness. It's not funny at all. I mean, it was just...
it's boring. It's really dull.
It is.
There's nothing funny or interesting or entertaining in the slightest. He just sits there and whines about how mean they are to him.
Yeah. And again, you know, he doesn't just bomb other countries. He bombs dinners where he speaks at them. Total crickets as he's going through his vicious lies about people. And of course, what he said about Caitlin Collins. I'm not a defender of Caitlin Collins, but, you know, she never smiles. And J.D. Vance says, come on, you know, have some fun with all this. And many people point out, well, you know, she's kind of serious when she asks him questions about war, about Jeffrey Epstein. Should we laugh about that? Should we have her conduct herself like Lucky Howard Lutnick, who every time the Epstein stuff is brought up, you see him in the back chuckling with his shoulders going up and down. He thinks it's so funny. The guy who was the neighbor of Jeffrey Epstein, who lied about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, had a business relationship with him, said, oh, no, I went over there once, never want to have anything more to do with him. Then he goes back and he does a joint, goes to his island, and they put up a joint venture together. Well, when we look at, as I said before, what is happening in the Caribbean, the fact that Trump is actually jacked. He's not jacked on cocaine, evidently, but he is pretending that his murder in the Caribbean, his Caribbean piracy, he is pretending that that is effective, as he has turned the failed war on drugs into a kinetic war. Deadly U.S. boat strikes have failed to curb the cocaine supply. Now, Trump is telling us that Operation Southern Spear has virtually ended drug trafficking by sea, except that the Pentagon and the DEA have said otherwise. We know that it's not going to work. Look, we've had 55 years, I think. It was 1971. I think Nixon did the war on drugs. But so that'd be 55 years of trying to stop drug use by interdiction, by police, that type of thing. All it has done is corrupted our police. It's corrupted our courts. It has given them a green light to steal property without even charging somebody with a crime, let alone convicting them of a crime. When we look at what it has done to our police, to our courts, when we look at what it's done to the drugs themselves, We have far more concentrated, dangerous forms of the drugs. The only way that you're going to get people to stop drugs is to understand that it is a spiritual issue. I had Matt Trujillo on. He gave his personal testimony of a kid growing up in a broken home and how he got involved in drug use and drug trade. The thing that brought him out of it was a relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ. That's what it's going to take, folks. You can't solve a spiritual issue by having the police or the military arrest people, kill people, which is what he's doing. And when you look at what is happening off the coast of Venezuela, 67 criminal attacks against boats without ever verifying if they even have any drugs on. Again, they have a very strict protocol, and the Coast Guard is still following that protocol everywhere else. And as Rand Paul pointed out, 25% of those times when they look at a boat that they think is suspicious, they don't have any drugs on it. But even when they find drugs on the boat, they don't line the people up on the side of the boat and execute them. That would be criminal. It's also criminal to shoot them from the air. And it's especially criminal to circle back around and to execute them when they're shipwrecked in the water. 221 extrajudicial murders. But Trump's got a long way to go before he can catch up with his hero. His hero was Robert Duterte in the Philippines. And I remember when Trump was singing his praises during Trump's first administration, and I called out Trump for that. I said, Robert Duterte said, well, we got a drug war going on here, and I'm going to stop it no matter what it takes. So he told the police, if they just think that somebody's involved in the drug trade, you're free to kill them. And he is now standing trial at the International Criminal Court, which is where Trump should be headed, along with a lot of other people in this regime. Duterte, the official body count of people that he killed was 6,248 people, executed without a trial, just on the whims of the cops and a hunch. Now, the unofficial estimate from human rights groups vary between 12,000 and 30,000. So what is it going to take to stop the drug use when you're going to use force like that? Trump, maybe he's just getting started. Who knows what he's going to do? Well, we're going to take a quick break, folks, and we will be right back. Stay with us. The globalists' next move. And now, the David Knight Show.
Hello, it's me, Volodymyr Zelensky. I'm so tired of wearing these same t-shirts everywhere for years. You'd think with all the billions I've skimmed off America, I could dress better. And I could, if only David Knight would send me one of his beautiful gray MacGuffin hoodies or a new black t-shirt with the MacGuffin logo in blue. But he told me to get lost. Maybe one of you American suckers can buy me some at thedavidknightshow.com. You should be able to buy me several hundred. Those amazing sand-colored microphone hoodies are so beautiful. I'd wear something other than green military cosplay to my various galas and social events. If you want to save on shipping, just put it in the next package of bombs and missiles coming from the USA.
Well, I talked about that restaurant that we saw 46 years ago in London, the Great American Disaster. If they're still in business, they could set up an entire section of just Trump issues there. This is from the UK Telegraph, talking about how the energy crisis created by Donald Trump, he's kicked off a global energy crisis, how that is going to play out in Europe, but also especially in the UK. They point out Britons face a winter of surging energy bills. The winter of their discontent is on its way, I guess, as Europe struggles to secure enough gas to fill its storage tanks. The Strait of Hormuz has pushed European gas stockpiles into energy crisis territory. The continent's storage tanks are barely 50% full, an historic low for this time of year. This will drive up prices as Europe competes with Asia to buy extra gas, mostly from America, on the spot market. Well, that's great, right? So we're going to sell all the, because I've seen a lot of MAGA cheerleaders saying that very thing. You understand that even if we are selling the gas and oil, a global depression is not in our interests. And if it's a depression and they can't afford to buy this stuff, this is really, this is like the broken window fallacy, quite frankly. Britain, which no longer stores significant amounts of gas, pays even more than its rival buyers. Again, they have, by design, the British government has determined that they're going to push their people into energy poverty, one way or the other. When they're going through ripping up gas lines and making them buy far more expensive and far less efficient for the kind of weather that they have heat pumps. And that's not something that's really going to help people in a climate that is as cold and damp as the UK is during winter. The UK's market model is that we will always pay more than anybody else rather than relying on storage, said an analyst there, and that is absolutely true. They do not want people to be able to afford to even heat their homes, let alone have a car. If other markets are going to struggle, it just means that the UK price will be even higher. Europe is in a bidding war with Japan and China for U.S. liquid natural gas supplies. Well, again, when we look at another aspect of Trump's Great American Disaster, this one is personal for him. Things only get worse for Trump as he's trying to duck the deposition in his frivolous lawfare lawsuit against the BBC, a $10 billion defamation lawsuit. He's been throwing out these $10 billion numbers over and over again. He sued the IRS for $10 billion for releasing his tax returns as if that was somehow damaging to him. And he also sued the Wall Street Journal because they factually reported the Jeffrey Epstein diary and the drawing that Trump sent as part of a birthday card. But he also came back after the BBC for defamation. Now, as I said at the time, it's going to be kind of difficult for him, especially with this BBC thing, because of discovery. And that is what's happening now. And so Trump and his lawyers are backpedaling big time because they don't want to have discovery. Last Tuesday, a federal magistrate judge handed Trump a devastating ruling. He must disclose his financial information as part of discovery in the case. His lawyers tried to argue that he had $10 billion loss personally, but no damage to his businesses. They said these are two separate things. The judge said, no, they're not. The lawyer told the judge that Trump is only going to claim damage for his reputation, not to his businesses. But the judge admonished him that she doesn't have the ability to excise his initial damages demand from the complaint. Trump doesn't appear to have filed a motion to do so either, said a former prosecutor. He said, even though the case isn't set for trial until March of next year, things only get worse for Trump from here on out. Discovery in civil cases can consume a great deal of time. The judge's order permits inquiry into more than 400 Trump entities, and Trump himself will almost certainly have to sit for a deposition. So again, this is, he put that out on social media, FAFO. Well, I guess he's FA'd again, and he's about to find out again. Noting that Trump's habit of withdrawing lawsuits when they become treacherous for him, particularly since depositions from him have ended badly, this former prosecutor says It's not wrong to start wondering how long it'll take for Trump to dismiss this lawsuit before he's forced to turn over any information that he has long sought to keep out of the public view. Expect some sort of mumbo-jumbo excuse about the demands of his presidency forcing him to step aside. And of course, we've kind of seen this with also with Michael Wolff. Now, Michael Wolff reported that he did a lot of interviews and discussions with Jeffrey Epstein before Epstein died. And he claims that Jeffrey Epstein told him that he was the one that introduced Trump and Melania. And Michael Wolff reported that. And when other people reported what Michael Wolff said, Melania would consistently threaten them with $1 billion lawsuit. And so many of them printed retractions, and she was successful in terms of getting people to be quiet about it. My question with all this is, why didn't she go after the source? If Michael Wolff is saying this and people are repeating what Michael Wolff said, then go after Michael Wolff. But she doesn't. And as a matter of fact, he taunted her with that. If he's any kind of a journalist, he would have a recording of his interviews with Jeffrey Epstein, and he would be able to prove what he asserts that Jeffrey Epstein had to say. But perhaps she's worried that it's really true, what he is saying. And so she started threatening other people. So he filed an anti-SLAPP lawsuit against her. But since she hadn't filed suit against him in May, the judge threw out that lawsuit, saying, well, a lawsuit hasn't been filed against you, so you don't have standing to do that. And the question is, why isn't she still coming after him? I think she's afraid, quite frankly. So we'll see what happens. Rate of discovery. And of course, a lot of the stuff that Trump is doing in terms of attacking the media consistently backfires on him. It backfired on him when he went after Jimmy Kimmel. It's the Streisand effect, if you will. And same thing is going to be happening with Caitlin Collins. You got everybody lined up to get Caitlin Collins on now because he attacked her that way. He just doesn't learn, does he? It truly is amazing. And I don't necessarily like Caitlin Collins, and I certainly don't like Jimmy Kimmel. But I don't like what Trump is doing with this. I don't think the president ought to be attacking speech. I think he ought to exercise his own free speech. The guy's got his own social media platform where he charges people $100,000 a month to participate in it, if they're foolish enough to pay that kind of money. Let's take a look, though, at a villain who is being dug up from the grave again, and that is Anthony Fauci. When you look at the resurfacing of Fauci, he has, over the last couple of days, we've had diaries of his being put out by Rand Paul. And of course, Rand Paul has been after Fauci, and good for him. I'm glad to see Fauci being attacked. He is a criminal, but understand this is much bigger than him. And the problem is that what they're focusing on is the fact that Fauci knew that it was something that leaked out of the lab, and he was telling everybody that it was a natural thing that happened out of the bat market or something. It was all a fraud. And as I said before, when you tell people that, what you're doing is you are putting Fauci up as the scapegoat. He is the person that everybody can, it's safe to pour their wrath out on him because he's out of government. He's pretty advanced in age. And of course, he's going to be protected. And there is an issue as to whether or not his pardon from Biden, whether or not that would stand scrutiny. But nevertheless, they're not going to do anything to Anthony Fauci. So everybody can pour their anger out on Anthony Fauci and not do anything about the corrupt institutions that let this happen. Here's what Anthony Fauci had to say in terms of some of the recently surfaced stuff that was caught on tape.
You were going to have schools, universities, and colleges are going to say, you want to come to this college, buddy? You're going to get vaccinated. Lady, you're going to get vaccinated. Yeah. Big corporations like Amazon and Facebook and all of those others are going to say, you want to work for us, you get vaccinated. And it's been proven that when you make it difficult for people in their lives, they lose their ideological bullshit and they get vaccinated.
Thank you. Are all objections to COVID vaccinations ideological bullshit, Dr. Fauci?
No, they're not, and that's not what I was referring to.
Well,
it is exactly what you were saying.
When you said making it hard for people to live without getting a vaccination, You affected people's ability to work, travel, be educated, to actually flourish in American society, to self-determine, as we're all given God-given rights. Shame on you.
Yeah, well, we see the same thing happening if you criticize Israel. You criticize the pharmaceutical companies. You criticize their virology or their vaccines. This is the totalitarian government I was talking about yesterday. I said they are ramping this up because this is the nature of unrestricted power. And power in Washington is now unrestricted. And we know what human nature is like, and we know what the human nature of politicians is like. You talk about the fallen nature of man. Well, there's nothing like the fallen nature of a politician. And these people can smell the technology that is about to roll out that's going to give them this kind of weaponized power. They can smell that like somebody's cooking dinner that they love somewhere. And that's exactly what this guy's doing. Think about that. You want to go to this college buddy? Well, you're going to have to get vaccinated. I would just say to him, well, give me that sheepskin because we're out of toilet paper because you scared the crap out of everybody and you shut down the supply chain. It's amazing the damage that was done, but that's not even the biggest legacy of Anthony Fauci, what he just did with the COVID fake pandemic. When you go back and look at his history, how many kids have suffered because of Anthony Fauci? Going back to 1986, even before the COVID stuff, how many sudden infant deaths because of the early vaccination? Because of repeated vaccination, because of aluminum and other adjuvants that are in the vaccine. How many children has he killed when he gave legal immunity to the vaccine companies with that? How many adults died from this COVID shot? How many kids died suddenly from heart issues because of this COVID mRNA shot? When you go back and look at Fauci's diaries, now they're saying, well, he relished fame. That's the least of his crimes, folks. His pride and his authoritarian boasting about what he's going to do to people who don't obey his orders. I said for the longest time, it was like a game of Simon Says. That's the way these dictators operate. That's how Trump operates. You do what I say, or I'm going to find a way to punish you. So did Simon say this? Did Fauci say that? You got to do exactly what he had to say. Rand Paul has accused Fauci of revealing his love for his newfound fame that COVID bought him. He's published a paragraph, the senator says, of him fangirling over explaining Amazon's virtual assistant Alexa to Barbara Streisand. She wanted to know if it was okay to get an mRNA vaccine. I told Barbara Streisand, yes. And he wrote down in his diary, oh, this was a great call. I guess this is another way of the Streisand effect. You know what I find interesting about this is that perhaps Barbara Streisand didn't trust the public statements of Fauci. She had to call him up personally to find out really what was going on with all of this. And, of course, when we look at this, I did this. It was for Halloween, the Monster Mash. But, again, I can't stress how much, if I can find this clip in here, I don't know, Travis, maybe you can find it. I can't stress how important I think it is to push back against this fake narrative that Fauci created the COVID virus with his gain of function stuff, that they released it. They were planning this stuff for a very, very long time. A recent congressional testimony from a CIA agent alleged that Fauci had injected himself, not with a vaccine, but he injected himself into the intelligence community. I'm trying to find this clip here. Can you find the Monster Mash thing? Here it is. I got it, the Monster Jab. Yeah, he injected himself into the intelligence community, folks, back when they started the original germ games, the original Dark Winter, 2 months before 9/11, and then they did an anthrax attack a week later, and I believe that was, they killed some people with that, but I believe that was a false flag attack by the same people who pulled off 9/11. They waited 2 months. They introduced legislation to be adopted in all the different states, the Model State Health Emergency Powers Act. And then Donald Trump flooded them with money to do what they had enacted based on the response to their false flag attacks. That very first germ game that they did, Dark Winter, 2 months before 9/11, they did that for 20 years. The last one was Event 201. But they were planning this whole thing, lock everybody down, Nobody moves until we've got a rapidly developed emergency vaccine. Yeah, the monster, folks, was not a lab leak. The monster was not gain of function. The monster was the jab, always was the jab. And he worked with DARPA and these other people, not only to do the germ game, but also to develop the mRNA vaccine.
I was working on the news late one night when my eyes beheld an eerie sight. For the monsters had rehearsed, to my surprise, the tactics to inject what they'd devised.
It was a jab.
The monster is the jab.
The monster jab.
The spike's a graveyard stab.
You're the mask.
I caught on in a flash.
It is the jab.
The monster is the jab. From the DARPA labs in the Castle East to the FDA, where pharma vampires feast. The ghouls rehearse before 911 how to poison us, which is what they've done.
It is the jab.
The monster is the jab.
The monster jab.
The spike's a graveyard stab.
The monster spike.
He'll put you on a slab.
It is the jab.
The monster is the jab. Big Pharma was having fun. The party had just begun. The guests included Fauci, Donald, then Biden. The scene was a lockdown, all were fearing the news. Supply chains were broken, we were singing the blues. The coffins, they told us, were about to arrive. You can see it all on Channel 5.
It was the jab.
The monster is the jab.
The monster jab.
The spike's a graveyard stab.
You're the mask.
It'll put you on a slab.
It is the jab.
The monster is the jab. From the Oval Office, his voice did ring. Hospital cash registers went ka-ching. When people caught on to keep on the lid, they said, whatever happened to the Wuhan lab?
It is the jab.
The monster is the jab.
The monster jab.
The spike's a graveyard stab.
The monster spike.
He'll put you on a slab.
It is the jab.
The monster is the jab. Now everything's cool. Lab leak's part of the plan. Their alibi echoes throughout the land. For you, the living, they will try it again when they get to your door. Tell Big Pharma, no more.
It is the jab.
The monster is the jab.
The monster jab.
The spike's a graveyard stab.
The monster spike.
It'll put you on a slab.
It is the jab.
The monster is the jab.
Mask. Easy here, boy. You impetuous young boy. Mask. Monster Macintosh. Monster
We're beginning to have a demographic problem, but then we plop 20 million people into the country, which kind of solved that temporarily. But if you want to look at, excess deaths coming out of the COVID era, they peaked at in 2021 at nationally at 31%, which was a disaster.
And just so I'm clear, that's excess, and so we have like sort of a normal trend of deaths, and then you're talking now we're 30% above the trend line.
Yeah, so that the peaked in 2021, and now it's running between 5 and 10%. These aren't my numbers. This is Swiss Re put out a report, I think, in 2024, saying that excess mortality is here to stay for the next 5 to 10 years. At least until 2030. And of course, they blame COVID for that. I myself have another opinion, as you know, which I won't mention on YouTube. But my opinion is different.
Yeah, you're not allowed to have opinions on YouTube. That'll get you kicked off real quickly. I can testify to that. I've played that game. I'm not going to censor myself for the tyrants at YouTube. They're nothing but thieves. They have built their fortune off of intellectual property theft, and they censor anybody who is exposing this deliberate attack on Americans and killing people. Just think about all the people that have died all the babies that have died from SIDS because of Anthony Fauci's vaccine schedule and his immunity for the pharmaceutical companies. Think about the school kids who are dying suddenly from heart attacks as they participate in sports. Think about all the children whose lives and the families whose lives have been destroyed by autism. That is Anthony Fauci's legacy. But they're going to hector him over some phony gain of function thing. It's pathetic.
If you have even just the slightest bit of common sense, looking at the excess deaths and seeing that 2021 is where it peaked, you should immediately go, okay, the virus story is nonsense then.
That's right.
They've had almost 2 years of the quote-unquote vaccine rolling out, shilling it, pushing it on everyone, forcing a lot of people into it.
Yeah.
It should have been tapering off if the virus was really what was causing it.
That's right.
Anybody with the slightest bit of common sense should be able to look at that statistic and go, something's wrong here.
Well, when you go back, and I'm not going to censor myself, I'll tell you why we know that this is the case. If you go back and look at 2020, we did have deaths start to rise. But what was happening at that point? Well, they were denying medical treatment to people who had heart or cancer issues. They were not allowed in the hospitals. We got to clear the decks for COVID. And here in America, Trump was paying the hospitals a bonus if they'd point at somebody and say, you got COVID. They didn't have to do a test even. The tests were phony. And the American Hospital Association even said that in August. They said, you promised us that we could just do a clinical diagnosis, just look at somebody and say, yeah, that's not a cold, that's COVID. And if we did that, you would give us $13,000 and you would give us a 20% bonus on everything that we did in terms of treating a COVID patient. So they were kicking other patients out of the hospital because they get a 20% bonus in addition to a $13,000 kick-in, and pushing them onto ventilators, getting $39,000 if you put them on a ventilator. And about 90% of the people who were put on ventilators died from that. So yeah, they had an increase in deaths. Then they came along with remdesivir, which, by the way, when Rand Paul is talking about Fauci and this other stuff, folks, Rand Paul's wife, he ran this, he did a Nancy Pelosi, just like Nancy Pelosi will have her husband do insider trading. Rand Paul had his wife buy Gilead stock, the people who made remdesivir. Run, death is near, as many people point out. It was a failed drug from the very beginning. Fauci had tried to sell it for AIDS. He'd tried to sell it for Ebola. And every time they would test it, they said it doesn't do anything except it harms, I think it was the liver, and kills people with that. So they had passed on that. So he, 1 week after China, did the same thing and said, well, this doesn't have any effect on COVID, but it does destroy the liver, whatever organ it was that it came after. I think it was the liver. And they posted that on the WHO site. It got taken down, and 1 week later, Anthony Fauci comes out and says, well, I've determined that it's the standard of care, right? That's his determination, his personal determination. Nothing scientific about it. Well, because he is science, right? Remember that? I am science. You want to tackle me, you're tackling science. And when you look at what he has done, the legacy of death and destroyed lives through autism and all the rest of the stuff, I'd say one of the greatest criminals of human history, in my opinion. And it just keeps on going. And yet Fauci is, to the pandemic, he is the lightning rod, the scapegoat that they're now using, so that nobody looks at the institutional corruption. Nobody looks at the long-term plan. Nobody looks at the fact that they practiced this for 20 years. Nobody looks at the fact that the military was working on this mRNA stuff for decades. So it's the way that they can excuse themselves from all this stuff. It's the same thing that's happening with Flock. Everybody's so focused on Flock, they aren't looking at the fact that Axon is thinking about planning to roll out 60 million of these things. So what's going to happen with the next lockdown? Well, they'll have their police surveillance state in place and other issues. As a matter of fact, it was so sad to see John Stossel, who I've always liked his work on economics and many other things like that, but he certainly does have some blind spots when it comes to technology and when it comes to corporations especially. John Stossel is out there talking about how human drivers are worse than serial killers. Listen to this incredible story from John Stossel. What a take he's got on all this
Drivers
stuff.
keep making mistakes. car accidents injure 2 million Americans a year and kill almost 40,000. Driving is just dangerous. But today, an amazing solution is available.
Same argument the gun control people make.
The Waymo Driver is a combination of custom-designed hardware and software that is responsible for performing the entire act of driving.
That's an ad for the driverless taxi, Waymo.
Yeah, and so is John Stossel, an ad for all of that stuff. Look, the arguments that he's making are the same things that have been made in terms of gun control. So, yeah, we need to have some electronically enabled or disabled guns, and we have to force that on people. All of these arguments that have been made in the past are the same types of things that he's doing. He ought to be ashamed of himself, and I retweeted that and responded to him with that. Before the program ends, I want to thank Doug Alug. Thank you very much for the tip. He said, thank you, David and crew. Let's remember to hit the like button, folks. Yes, please do. That really does help a lot. If you can't support the program, at least you can support the program with a like. Thank you. And thank you, IRS Machine Gun. Thank you so much. He said, here's a cup of gas instead of a cup of Joe.
There's nothing like sitting around after a hard day's work and sipping on some premium unleaded. Let me tell you what.
We may wish that we had some before too much longer. Who knows about that? But, when you look at the argument that John Stossel is making, we've heard this argument before from people like Elon Musk pushing in terms of self-promotion. It hasn't worked out too well in recent history, has it? Do we have human drivers who drive full speed into emergency vehicles, ambulances, police cars, semi-trailers because they can't see them? Do we have that happening? Do we have situations where they block intersections and block emergency vehicles, where they jammed up, I think it was San Francisco on the 4th of July. They just stalled out and blocked everybody. Or you have a situation where they drive into floodwaters in Texas, or where somebody has set off fireworks in an intersection and they just drive right over that. The self-driving cars are made by humans, and guess what? Humans make mistakes even when they're engineers. And so, yes, human drivers do make mistakes, but they are not the kind of obvious mistakes that these self-driving cars do. And you need to understand where this is all headed. Again, John Stossel had a real blind spot when it came to corporate censorship that was being done on behalf of the government. And now he is pushing an agenda on behalf of the government, again, to make sure that people are considered to be too dangerous to drive. We have to take that away from people. Remember, that was our only escape vehicle that we had during COVID, was being able to get in the car. They're going to fix that. And you got people who foolishly are pushing that same corporate narrative, because for people like Cato Institute and Reason and unfortunately John Stossel, corporations can do no wrong. Well, yes, they can. They think that all evil is coming from government, but they don't realize how corporations and governments have merged. That, folks, is called fascism. And that is what we're seeing now with the police surveillance state and taking away cars from humans, declaring human drivers to be incapable of driving safely, is a tactic that was the first project competition of DARPA, was self-driving vehicles. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a good day. The Common Man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. But each of us has worth and dignity, created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at thedavidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. thedavidknightshow.com.